This program is made possible by the loyal financial support of the friends and partners of Family Policy Institute.
You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world.
Good evening and welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we're going to be talking about the electoral amendment. The Constitutional Court made a ruling in June 2020 to allow independent candidates to stand in the 2024 national and provincial general elections. The public participation process is currently underway. There's a whole lot of controversy surrounding that. But I've invited Pastor John van Niekerk of City Harvest Church in Pietermaritzburg to join us to talk about an initiative that he started called Raising Righteous Rulers. And we want to know more about that because it relates to the upcoming general elections in 2024. So Pastor John van Niekerk, so good to be speaking to you again. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's always good to track you and to see what God is doing in your life. And I know that you play an important role in the whole South African agenda.
Thank you so much, Pastor. I fondly remember the times I spent one night at your home. You hosted me,
Yes.
Preached at your church a few times. And it was wonderful experiences a few years ago because I haven't seen you for at least 3-4 years because of the lockdowns and all of that. But it's great connecting with you again. You're a very influential man. Your heart is for the nation. You're involved in all kinds of things. And so I was very excited to hear you start this initiative called Raising Righteous Rulers, RRR. And there's a story behind that, and we want to hear that story. So perhaps you can just explain to us and the viewers how this came about. What is the vision behind Raising Righteous Rulers?
Well, I'll just take a minute of your time because I want to share. I've been involved in ministry now for over 45 years, full-time ministry. And 4 years ago, a prophet came into the church and he prophesied and he said that God has two projects that he wants me to be involved in. After the meeting, I asked him what was it. He said, I'm going to have to go and seek the face of the Lord myself. I must go and ask God. God never told him what it was specifically. And then on the 12th of June in 2020, I read the News 24, just a small article that said, ruling of the Constitutional Court instructing Parliament to amend their electoral rules to accommodate independent candidates. When I saw that article, it seemed like it was lit up. It just stood out. It was like a neon. And I spoke to my wife and I said, this is what the prophet spoke to me about that I should be involved in. She agreed. And then I spoke to the leadership of the church. I and I said to them, I would like you to release me for 2 years, that I would like to travel through the nation to speak to churches and interpret the handwriting that's on the wall. Like Daniel, chapter 5, the handwriting was clear where everybody could see above the candlestick, and yet they did not know what it meant. And so the Lord told me that I must travel through the nation to interpret the handwriting on the wall. I did not have a door to speak. If there were other aspects of ministry, people would have called me to be involved in because they had known me for a number of years. But this was a whole brand new ball game. I hadn't been following the court case. And when I saw the article, it was the first time on the 12th of June that it was stirred in my heart. Long story short, the church released me. They said, we bear witness, you can go. So for the last 2 years to 18 months, I've been sharing, traveling the nation, speaking to churches, speaking to ministers, fraternals, interpreting the handwriting on the wall. Now, up until this time, there are many church leaders that don't even know that there's a handwriting on the wall with the ruling of the Constitutional Court. Some of them that do know don't understand the implications and what it means to us as the Church of Jesus Christ. Others know about it, but there's a complacency. Well, so the challenge that we have is to go out with zeal and a passion to make this message clear. God said to me, this message is for the nation, but more so to the Church of Jesus Christ. So within a few weeks, God divinely leading us, we had the privilege of sitting with Advocate Alan Nelson in his home, and he was the advocate that argued the case and won the case in the Constitutional Court. And he unpacked to us all that it meant. So that was the start of my journey.
Okay, so was that where this Raising Righteous Rulers initiative came from? Is that the birth of it, the genesis of it, that God began to speak to you about raising up righteous rulers to go into government?
Yes, and then the thing was that the sector of the church that I belonged to, grew up in, they somehow divorced themselves from the area of governance. They left that, they said, no, we're going to get to heaven. So I repented of the mindset of my fathers in the gospel, and I began to say that God has Daniels and Josephs and Esthers in the church, and the responsibility of the church was to identify these Daniels, prepare them for their purpose. We as the church have no problem identifying a preacher. We don't have a problem identifying somebody that can lead worship, or a teacher or a prophet, but we have neglected the people that are called to serve the purposes of God in the arena of governance. And so that was the mandate that the Lord gave to me.
Yeah, Pastor John, so Pastor John, if I can just come in here. So do you think this is one of the reasons? You're saying the church has neglected that aspect of raising up righteous rulers in the church to go into our governance, local government, provincial government, national government. And because they've neglected that, we are, South Africa, we're in the situation we are today, where we have so much corruption and wickedness and godliness. It's because we've left it up to the ungodly to govern us. And now we're in a terrible situation in this country where everything appears to be falling apart because of the lack of understanding, the lack of wisdom, the lack of leadership, the lack of godly values and understanding. We are in a terrible position. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that, because Jesus said, "Ye are the salt of the earth." You're the salt. And if we don't influence areas of governance, then we will be trodden underfoot of men.
Yes.
We will be having prayer meetings against laws that were legislated, because there was nobody that was in the place that could say, this is not the law of God, and stand for righteousness and do their best to try and change the situation. And so we have failed. It's the church that has failed. And I think if God has given us an opportunity, in the words of Alan Nelson, he said, a revolution has taken place in the nation without one shot being fired. Those were his words. Or one life being lost. And then he went on to say, after I shared with him about what God had laid upon my heart, he said to me that the victory that they won in the Constitutional Court it will be lost if the church does not take its place and identify and prepare and raise up righteous rulers to occupy the space. So God has given the church an opportunity to turn this nation around for good.
Yeah,
How
and
could
so
we
so
have-
Pastor John, so you're saying that if the church takes this mandate seriously, to raise up men and women of integrity, of godliness, skilled people, talented people, and send them into governance, to send them, raise them and train them up to go into every sphere of government, that is one of the ways we're going to turn this nation around, because, the Bible does say righteousness exalts a nation. And I think everybody watching this program must agree that our country is in dire straits. If you look at just everything that's happening, the levels of corruption and fraud and racketeering and money laundering, billions and billions of tax money being stolen and wasted, while the poor are getting poorer, and our state-owned enterprises are all collapsing into disrepair, and just, we're heading towards a failed state. And the question, you're asking, Pastor John, and I'm asking is, where is the church in all of this? We have so many talented, skilled people, but why don't we have them in places of authority so that we can change this nation? And I think that's what you're busy with the Raising Righteous Rulers initiative. So, Pastor John, we have to go for a break now, commercial break. But when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about this initiative that God has given you, Raising Righteous Rulers, and how this is going to impact, if we get this right, impact the elections in 2024, the general elections, because now we're busy with the process of the electoral amendment that will accommodate and allow independent candidates to stand. So that means all these independent candidates, these godly men and women that you guys are busy raising in, they're going to be standing in that election, and we can bring about the change that way. So more with Pastor John van Niekerk of City Harvest Church in Pietermaritzburg after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. I'm speaking to Pastor John van Niekerk of City Harvest Church in Pietermaritzburg, who started an initiative called Raising Righteous Rulers. And how important this is, because we have an election coming up in 2024. And for the first time in our democracy, independent candidates can contest the general elections, and that is the provincial and national elections. So Pastor John van Niekerk from City Harvest Church in Pietermaritzburg, welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So we were talking about this initiative of Raising Righteous Rulers, and we've got this election coming up. And obviously your mandate or your vision is to raise up in the churches around the country, raise up these righteous men and women, godly people with skills and talents that can go into all the very different areas of government, particularly now national and provincial government, because that's the next election waiting us in 2024. But tell us how, what is your vision? How do we roll out this plan?
We first speak to pastors, leaders, fraternals, networks in an area, and we encourage them to find their brothers, other leaders, and to work together. And while their doctrine, their style of worship might change, this is one area where they could agree to work together. It's a unifying factor.
Yes.
While we are, this will bring the body of Christ together in a way where a governance which affects all of us, because some pastors have been having a challenge to get premises for worship, etc., etc. And if you have men and women that are sympathetic towards the purposes of God, it's going to be much more easier. And then if the ministers get together and they form an apostolic oversight in the city of Pietermaritzburg, and they have a selection process where they will ask each of the churches, first the churches, to identify in their local churches and let them come and stand before this panel of apostolic oversight, and they will select to see who is the best person to serve the purpose of God in that community. So it's going to develop a culture, a kingdom culture, because the Bible says if we are willing to serve another. So we all understand the scriptures, and this is an opportunity to put it into practice. If I am not selected as one of the candidates that's standing, that's recommended by the church, I still will serve the person that is selected. I will be 100% behind him. I will do everything together with my team to make sure that he gets enough votes so that he can enter that arena. The Bible tells us in the book of Exodus, Jethro, the principle that we encourage is the Jethro principle. It's very simple. Jethro said to Moses, he said, choose men that are able. We're not going to choose men that can dance or can pray in the spirit a long time. It's men that have the ability, men that are able. In my city, Pietermaritzburg, our greatest challenge is that we have men in governance that don't know how to run the department. So we have to have men and women that would be able. First of all, they must have skills. They come from areas of expertise and the church is behind them. Secondly, Jethro said, men that fear God. If we had men that feared God in our nation, we would not have the Zondo Commission. We would not have the challenges that we face. Men that fear God.
Precisely. Sorry, carry on.
Thirdly, it was men that hate iniquity.
Gain. Yes.
Dishonest gain. So, and then the fourth one is the men of integrity, men of truth. Those four pillars for a candidate, man, our nation will be turned around.
Absolutely. And of course, when Pastor John, when you're referring to men, you mean men and women, obviously,
men and women,
because
men and women.
We have men and women in our government, in local, provincial, and national government. And I agree with every point there, because that's precisely what we're looking for. The way Moses selected these men, tens and 50s and hundreds, and put them over groups of people, it's almost similar to our local government, provincial government, and national government. So there would be people that would emerge out of the churches with the skills and capacity to go into the different spheres of government. And we have the selection process and this apostolic oversight, preparing, training, and getting behind these candidates. It would be amazing, Pastor John, if this could work. So how is it working in the churches?
Yeah, that's the church. The churches need to catch the vision, and we will hold the men that we are going to endorse and support in an area. We're going to hold them accountable. They will be accountable to that apostolic oversight, that we could recall them at any time if they begin to meander.
Yeah,
I was in Cape Town.
You know that. Sorry, Pastor John, just before you go on to that point, that accountability issue is one of the biggest issues in South Africa in government, because people are stealing and running things into the ground, and nobody's taking accountability for it. And that's why we have the Zondo Commission, because there's so much corruption and theft and destruction of state enterprises, and nobody seems to know who's responsible for it. Nobody's responsible. Everybody's doing a good job, but everything is falling apart. So you see, there's no accountability, and that principle of accountability is something we need to get into the people that are in government and just everywhere. But it's not happening. And if the church can lead in this area, it would bring a major turnaround in our country.
Because the apostolic oversight will hold them accountable, tell them the consequences before they endorse them, and we will make it publicly that we will not endorse what you're doing if you're misbehaving. And somebody will say, what about the family? The brother knew that, the sister knew that they were, before they went in, the consequences, and we have to hold men and women accountable.
That's right. I agree. You were saying, Pastor, that you went when you were in Cape Town. Just complete that thought.
When I was in Cape Town before the local municipal elections, I shared this message several times in different places. And then I had the privilege of going back to Cape Town again. And I saw posters in one area, in one zone, of about 5 different Christian guys that were standing for election, Christian groupings. And I wrote a letter, and I sent this letter out to the pastors, and I said, I can guarantee you're going to lose, because it was meaning men and women. But because the church was divided, because all of them they said the Lord laid it upon their hearts to be involved in governance. But because they did not identify who was the most capable one amongst them, the one that was able, and we say, we will support you, and have a kingdom mentality. And if it's like soccer, when one guy scores the goal, the whole team rejoices. And like I said, like I wrote this letter to the pastors in that area, I said, you're going to lose. And then when the results came out, we lost because we weren't a united front. We have to be a united front.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that is one of the weaknesses of the church today, the contemporary church in South Africa, Pastor John, is that sadly the church is fractured. It's not united in any sense of the word. Everybody's doing their own little thing. And we need unity. We need the church to work together, especially the leaders to come together. We've got so many issues that we have to confront daily. We've got the electoral amendment. We've got this single marriage statute where government is attempting to redefine marriage. That marriage will no longer be a union between a man and a woman. It will be a man and a woman, a man and a man, a woman and a woman, and transgender. It will even be group marriages in the future. So marriage will be anything you want it to be. And they're busy with that legislation right now. And then, of course, we've got this amendment to the National Health Act, where government wants to make permanent the Disaster Management Act provisions or regulations, make it permanent so they can take away people's rights and control them at will, however and whenever they want to. They're making it permanent, and it shouldn't be permanent. And so all of these issues also, the Deputy Minister of Justice has put out a communication that they are starting the discussion about decriminalizing the entire sex industry in South Africa, which is the most extreme thing you can do as far as prostitution is concerned. It's going to be devastating for this country if they do that. But when all of these things are happening, we don't hear the church. There's nothing from the church. Talking about these issues, engaging government leaders, it's not happening because we have different organizations, groupings, denominations, not talking to each other and not talking to government either. So we're heading into a kind of abyss, Pastor John.
Yeah. Well, those things that you just mentioned, that should be an alarm bell ringing loud and clear, causing church leaders to say, listen, we need to get our act together while God has given us an opportunity. If they don't wake up with what you've just mentioned about the Marriage Act and the Health Act, then God help us. I just want to share this before I know we're coming down to a close. Jesus said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And he taught, and he said, the house is clean, and the demon, the spirit that influenced the behavior patterns of the house before it was cleaned, is driven out. He comes back after a period of time, and he inspects the house. He sees it's clean, but he says, I will go and find 7 more worse than myself. He goes and finds 7 more spirits worse than himself, and then he goes back to occupy the space.
Yeah.
These are the words of Jesus. These are the words of Jesus. Jesus said that. Now, if the church does not occupy that space, because with this ruling of the Constitutional Court, the house will be clean. It's an opportunity to clean house. We can talk about the past and everything, but this is a brand new opportunity to clean house. But if we don't have righteous rulers occupying that space, men of God, men of integrity, men of truth, men that hate corruption, somebody is going to occupy that space.
Yeah, Pastor
And
John,
if the person that occupies...
yeah, it's already happening. It's already happening because we've left this void of leadership, and wicked people are taking up those leadership roles, and we can see the implications of it, what it's doing to our country. Pastor John, unfortunately, we've run out of time. We have a short half-hour program. Love to speak to you for at least another 2 hours. It's always interesting speaking to you, but we've run out of time. So I want to put the information, Raising Righteous Rulers, on the screen and website address so that people can contact you if they want to know how can we get involved, how can we help to get this initiative around the country so that we're raising up the righteous and godly men and women that will stand in the elections, that they can contact you and you can help them to spread this message. So Pastor John van Niekerk of City Church in City Harvest Church in Pietermaritzburg, thank you once again for joining us and for sharing your insights.
And thank you, Pastor Errol. Please continue the good work that you're doing. Remember that the battle is the Lord's and he can win it by many or by few. Keep doing what you're doing. God bless you. Thank you.
Amen.